righty, well, we'll go ahead and get started. Kate will probably roll in here shortly. Like to call the January 5th, 2020 remote meeting for the West Richland City Council to order at 6:01. And before we call the roll, I'll ask Stephanie to please read our virtual meeting ground rules and then call the order. Roll call.
All right, please make sure the name shown at the bottom of your video view is the name you would like the facilitator to use. You can change this by right-clicking on the three dots in the upper corner of your video view and clicking Rename. You can choose to leave this as the name for all upcoming meetings or just this one instance. If you have an unstable internet connection, please also connect through the phone. That will allow you to continue to participate even if you lose internet connection. If you call in after you've joined on video, click the arrow between mute and video, and there is a button for switch to phone audio. Clicking this button provides a participant ID. Please call in with that ID, as then your phone is associated with your video. We will mute everyone until a public hearing, and when the mayor calls the public hearing to order, if you raise your hand, he will call on you and you will be unmuted. To virtually raise your hand, click on Participants and then click on Raise Hand. If you are participating by phone only, press *9 to raise your hand. Written comments on official public hearings will be read during the meeting. Brent Derry.
Here.
Richard Bloom.
Here.
Fred Brink.
Here.
Gail Brown.
Here.
Rich Buell.
I'm here, Stephanie, but I'm going to have to leave after the Section 7 ordinances tonight because I do have some commitments later on. Thank you.
Thank you. David Fetto.
Here.
Kate Moran.
Present.
John Smart.
Here.
That's pretty loud.
Thank you. And with that, I will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Oops. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Took me a while to find my video button there. All righty, council, thank you very much. We have the agendas before you, and I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
I move to approve the agenda as presented, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
A motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 I'm sorry, I didn't catch the second.
That was
I seconded.
Oh, thank
John.
you.
Yeah. Okay. And then again, please, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign, please. Motion carried. Thank you, council. We have no presentations this evening. That brings us to our consent agenda, which includes the approve the minutes of the regular meeting of December 15th, 2020, the special meeting of December 17th, 2020, an ordinance 0121 related to speed limit on portion of Keene Road, and a motion to authorize the mayor to execute financial or franchise agreement with Benton County, and a motion to award engineering services contract for water system plan update.
I don't know.
You don't have to turn the volume down.
And a motion to award excuse me, I got distracted from background noise. A motion to award engineering services contract for general sewer system plan. Resolution 0121 approved Wainwright short plat security agreement, and resolution 0221 setting public hearing date, the utility easement vacation. Is there anyone from the audience who would like to speak to our consent agenda this evening? If so, raise your hand or star *9 and you'll be recognized. I see no one. Stephanie, do you see anyone?
I do not.
All right, very good. Thank you. So with that, council, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
I move to pass the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, please. Motion carried. Thank you, council. Moving on to ordinances, resolutions, motions, and public hearings this evening. 7A and B are a public hearing and ordinance vacating an access easement for CB Group. And we'll have Alicia present her staff report this evening. Alicia, thank you.
Good evening. Tonight, we're asking you to pass an ordinance authorizing the vacation of a portion of the 30-foot easements and a 20-foot in width easement, access easement for the CB Group property. If you'll look in your attachments, there's a vicinity map and a map of which easements we're talking about. A little bit of background, the CB Group applied to vacate those access easements along Wayland Drive. In detail, there's a portion of a 30-foot access easement on the south boundary of Lot 4, a portion of the 30-foot access easement on the north boundary of Lot 5, and a 20-foot access easement in the northeast corner of Lot 1. And you'll see that that map in attachment 2 in your packet. We received no objections from agencies that we sent out to for comment. And in reviewing the application, we found that vacating the easements would not unduly jeopardize health, safety, welfare, or public good, and that the easements no longer serve any useful public purpose. We recommend that the council pass ordinance 221 to vacate the access easements as indicated.
Thank you, Alicia. With that, I'll open the public hearing at 6:08. If you would like to provide comments, please raise your virtual hand or press *9 on your telephone. And then we'll ask the clerk to unmute you. And then if you would state your name and city residence for the record, please. I see no one. Stephanie, do you see anyone?
I do not.
Okay. That I'll close the public hearing at 6:09. And ordinance 0221 CB Group access easement vacation. Council, do I have a motion, please?
I move to pass ordinance 02-21 authorizing the vacation of a portion of the 30-foot and 20-foot in width access easement for file VACA 05-2020.
Second.
I have a second, and that was Councilman Fetto. Very good. Any questions of Alicia this evening, council, or discussion amongst yourselves? I do not see any hands up. Stephanie, do you?
I do not.
Okay, very good. Thank you, council. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, like sign. Motion carried unanimously. Thank you, council. Appreciate that. Thank you, Alicia. Moving on to item 7C, an ordinance amending the 2021-2022 biennial budget. And I will ask Erin to present her staff report this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, everybody. Tonight before you, we have the first budget amendment of the 21-22 biennium. This amendment has two parts. The first is an amendment to pay for the note for the Raceway property located at the intersection of Keene and Van Giesen. Some history with this property is we purchased it from the Port of Kennewick December of 2019 for a purchase price of $1,816,000. The city paid $500,000 cash at closing, and the Port of Kennewick is carrying the remaining $1,316,000 note at a 0% interest due April 2023. The agreement with the port is they will seek reimbursement from Benton County for a portion of City of West Richland's Ruhr County Capital Funds, or RCCF funds. If the port does not have a project to qualify or does not apply for a reimbursement by April 2023, the city will need to pay cash for any portion not paid by RCCF funds. As of October 2020, Port of Kennewick published their 21-22 work plan that has not identified a project to use RCCF funds. City of West Richland's experience with RCCF projects is they can take several months to be approved by the county, which is a requirement before even beginning the project. In addition to concerns whether the port will seek RCCF funds, Section 9 of the Deed of Trust requires the city to receive written consent from the port before the city can lease or sell any portion of the property. This also means the land swap with Alexander that is in the works, or down the road with the lease agreement with Formic would have to be signed off with written consent from the port. This budget amendment would appropriate the $1,316,000 from cumulative reserve to pay the note. A conservative approach was taken when putting this amendment together, being so close to the beginning of the year or even the biennium. We have not closed 2020 as of yet. In fact, we still have a couple weeks to keep it open. So we do not know exact ending balances of 2020. So staff identified a few lines that were estimated to be spent in 2022. And so we're going to show the reduction to those lines, and in the future hope to bring back in a budget amendment to put them back in the budget as we true up. So the first line is with community development, professional services. I think there's two lines there. This is for mixed use downtown plan and economic plan update, which was projected to start in 2022. In addition, the police had budgeted to replace 7 vehicles and purchase 2 new vehicles for 2 new officers, for a total of 9 vehicles. This amendment delays just purchasing 1 of those vehicles. And a transfer from the general fund to cumulative reserve fund in the amount of $260,442 for a net zero effect on the general fund. In cumulative reserve, we are recognizing an addition to the beginning balance in the amount of $294,992 from the sale of the old City Hall building that happened fall of 2020. The cumulative reserve balance being used from prior sales of property and accumulated interest in the amount of $1,055,558,000. So if you took the $1,055,558 and added it to our transfer in, that gets us to our $1,316,000. This portion of cumulative reserve does not include any portion already set aside from the sale of the golf course from 2017. Also keeps intact the $200,000 reserve for Left One medical emergency. We expect to be able to bring back a future budget amendment to council as early as end of first quarter this year, after we close 2020 and have more exact ending balance numbers. At the latest, we expect to be able to bring these items back when we receive proceeds from the sale of the old police facility. As I stated earlier, this is a conservative approach to maintain a balanced budget. The second part of this budget amendment is for a capital project in the 302 capital improvement plan, or capital improvement using the real estate excise tax. In November 2020, the city received notice from the Transportation Improvement Board, the grant for a Harrington Road preservation project has been selected. This grant is 85% grant funded and 15% local match. So for a total of $300,000. In addition, since we're in the middle of the project, not qualifying for grant funds would be upgrading the ADA ramps. And so an additional $100,000 for a total of $400,000 from 302. So you can see the detail in Exhibit B with all the supporting documentation. The fiscal impact would be to increase appropriations in the amount of $1,716,000, bringing a total revised budget of $72,808,654.
Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate that. And is there anyone from the audience who would like to speak to this agenda item this evening? If so, please raise your hand or *9 on your phone. Stephanie, I do not see anyone. Do you?
I do not.
Okay, very good. With that, council, may I have a motion, please?
Mr. Mayor, I move to pass ordinance 03-21, amending the City of West Richland 2021/2022 biennial budget.
I have a
Second.
And a motion and a second from Councilman Buell. Council, if there's any questions you have of Aaron or any clarification Mr. Slade might be able to assist in, please go ahead and raise your hand.
I have a question, but I don't have my screen up to raise my hand, so.
I've got you. Go ahead. I've got you recognized, Councilman Smart.
Thank you. Yeah, so my question, Aaron, now I've messed up my view. Hang on a second here. I gotta get back. Okay, my question is really on the last part, really the last paragraph. Looking for clarification on where it says, in addition to the pavement preservation portion of the project, this amendment also appropriates an additional $100,000 from the fund balance for upgrading ADA ramps within the project limits, which is not an eligible use of grant funds. Why do we have to upgrade ramps? Are new ramps being put in? How does this work?
We could probably ask Roscoe to
Roscoe
comment on that one, please.
Okay, thanks, Roscoe.
Yeah, Aaron does the money. She doesn't do the ADA ramps.
I don't, yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
Two-part.
So John, when we go in on a roadway project, and if we are doing a structural to the roadway surface, which an overlay would be, we're required by ADA to bring up the ramps to current standards, meaning the cross slope and the detection things. So I think there's about 8 of them out there, maybe a couple extra that would need to be brought up to current standards. We did not include them in the grant. If you remember the email that got sent out, there was only 3 projects in Eastern Washington selected, 11 the whole state. It's highly competitive, not a lot of money. And so to get the $230,000 grant, we decided to fund, with the application, we said we'd fund that with our own money. And that was a successful strategy to secure that.
So our local match is 70,000.
The local match is $40,000.
Oh.
So the total project's about 270. I asked finance to put a few extra dollars in there for staff time just to verify. to make sure we have enough. And then also the 100,000 is design and construction ADA ramps.
So is an ADA ramp just like a single sidewalk ramp, or is that like for an intersection where you would do all four, or one on each side of one corner?
Yeah, if you do one side, you got to do the receiving side too. So think about Harrington from basically 62nd there at the fire station all the way just past, right before you get to Twin Bridges. So I think there's about 8 of them, and you're basically ripping out the sidewalk behind it, and typically you can saw cut the curb to make it match the cross slopes and stuff and the landings that the new standards require.
Okay, so then just to clarify, so I understand, an ADA ramp is a single ramp, not one on one side of a corner and one on the other side of a corner. You know, in other words, there's a single corner on the road.
You're talking 2 in the same corner, John?
Yeah, that's what I'm asking. Is it 2 on the same corner, or is it really just one ramp, one actual sloping concrete to the asphalt?
We've got to do all of them that are in the project limits, and I think there's.
I'm trying to figure out how much it costs per ramp. It seems like a lot of money for ramps.
It is. I pulled the ballpark because I don't have the estimate. Sometimes you can fix them for 2,500. Sometimes you can do them for 5.
Okay.
Sometimes it takes a little bit more, and you have to do retaining walls behind them. So I don't have a detailed estimate. So I put a number out there, John. My gut is we're going to be substantially under that.
I hope so. That's, you know, because if there's 8 of them, that's $12,500 a piece. That's a really expensive piece of concrete.
Yeah.
Okay, that was my comment. I just was hoping to get some understanding there.
You hold me to it, John. So when we come back to close it out, you'll see what we spend.
I'm looking you in the eye.
Yeah, it's a good check and balance. So.
All right, thank you.
Gail?
Yeah, I wanted to go back to the 1.3 something that we're going to pay the port off of, and this disappoints me that we're doing this huge of a budget amendment the very first thing in January. I did have a chance to talk to the port a little bit. I did talk to Mike Bradshaw as well. I want to remind council, we went into the port, we all had a copy of that contract. We thought this was great. We were going to get the fire station. We were going to get the racetrack, And a copy of that contract with the port was sent to all of us. We read it or scanned it or whatever we did with it, but we did come back and told the mayor to go ahead and execute that contract. And I don't understand that within a couple of months, we were trying to change, and that's us, that we were trying to change what was in the contract because it was very blunt about what we could and couldn't do in the contract. And so now we're down to this. And so if we were going to do something else, and we want to look transparent, and we want to do everything with this land stuff, don't sign a contract that we don't plan on keeping 2 months before you change it. Yeah, I guess is what I'm saying. I went through Roscoe's power thing again. It's kind of hard for me to tell if he's talking to us or he's talking to somebody else, because a lot of that I didn't know. And I assume he's talking to other staff. Because when I looked through the whole year of what we've done with this, except for today, this has all been on a consent agenda. We have not, it's been COVID. We've not gone to the public. We've done a lot of, stuff besides the fire station, because we had the fire station on our agenda. I mean, we needed to get that done. But it seems like we did a lot. I know we weren't supposed to do anything between March 24th through June. We weren't supposed to. So for when we were supposed to be closed down for COVID, not having meetings, this seems like a lot of stuff. And I guess I'm going to leave it there. I could go point by point of things. It doesn't jive to me, but that's the overall umbrella. And I think you guys all know this. I'm getting perturbed that every time we do have some overages, that it's going to we don't have a plan. We haven't put money into parks for years. We have not put money into preservation for years. But when we do have extra, we've got it spent before we've even we haven't looked at the overall city. It just seems to keep going in a direction that we're not looking at. We are in charge of the budget. So we can't just always just say, okay, we're going to do this parking lot. Well, we've got parks that don't have parking lots, and we haven't done anything with these parks. So, I mean, you know, are we spending all this money the way we should be spending it? We've got to start showing some of this other stuff up. I'm not voting for this. But, you know, that's kind of my 2 cents.
Thank you. Councilmember Bloom?
Yeah, I guess my first comment is that this level of presentation, we probably should have had a finance committee meeting beforehand, just to make that comment up front. I guess I'm a little concerned of the reduction in the community development professional services contract from the standpoint, what are we, you know, a lot of the discussions we've had relative to the loading, demand loading on community development in support of the expanding housing that's going on along Van Giesen. I'm a little concerned with delaying this contract. What are we putting off? That's my first question.
It is for Eric could probably step in here, but
no, that's my question to Eric is,
okay.
Not going to do.
In discussions with Aaron and other staff, when we put this proposal together, Councilmember Bloom, is that we're not putting anything off. This is just borrowing money from one account for now that will get paid back before I need to spend those monies. So this is 2022 dollars that I'm giving up now that I need in 2022, that once we sell the police station downtown, once that closes, I'll get all this money back. And so I don't need it today. It won't be delaying anything.
Well, no, the staff report says delaying hiring. That's why I bring it up. It says delay.
Delay hiring is for the police officer.
No, it was delay hiring a consultant. And that was just my language, I guess. It's mainly when we sat down with senior staff, it was like, these were items that were going to be 2022 items. So we could, we anticipate the police station being sold August. We anticipate having the revenue from that in August. So like I said, at the latest, we'll be bringing back a budget amendment then to give these back. But Eric doesn't have any plans for 2021 to hire a consultant. So I guess that was just a mishap on my language. But it's basically just acknowledging that we're putting that off until 2022. But to be conservative, I reduced the budget, showing that this is what we're doing. We're reducing the budget and showing that. So, because it's not good to put, there's no final in the police station. It's highly likely that it will be closing August of 2021.
My second point, I would like to clarify a misspeak by Ms. Brown. She kept saying fire station when I believe she meant police station. It's just to clarify the word. I guess the question comes down to is, as I'm scanning through this, so what is going to be left in the cumulative reserve?
It is, here, let me pull it up really quick. This is about 1 point. So it's about just over 1.3 million. So 1,368,000. Just under 1.2 of that is from the golf course proceeds, which previous council has decided for park type improvements. And then we also have the $200,000 that is a reserve for the left one medical. And so that is also remaining in there.
So basically, we're stripping all that we could out of the cumulative reserve.
Yes. And that's why we did the transfer of what the transfer from general fund to cumulative reserve to make up the difference, that to make the full 1,316,000.
So where did the other properties in the old complex City Hall campus, where did that money go?
That was all part of cumulative reserve. So we had the Belmont Business District. Let's see, what else did we have? The Development Services Building, and then the 2 vacant lots behind the police station, as well as the old City Hall building. And then we used a portion of that. So the police station, the bond funds paid for a small portion of the initial 500,000. And then the remaining 400,000 was from cumulative reserve back in December of 2019. And then there's also interest like accumulated over time in that cumulative reserve fund.
Anything else, Councilman Bloom?
I guess not.
Thank you, sir. And then I see Councilmember Moran.
Thank you. So I just want to clarify with the cumulative reserve. First off, you said we're going to have how much, Aaron, after we do all of the transfers in and out within the cumulative reserve?
It'll be just
Zero?
over 1,300,000.
That's after all of these transfers in and out, we'll have that money in there?
That will be
In the positive?
remaining. That is positive, and that is the remaining balance after this appropriation to the port.
So we have more than enough in the cumulative reserve to cover this with, I see head shaking. Perhaps I'm not understanding cumulative reserve.
Cumulative reserve is like basically kind of a managerial portion of the general fund. So it's still considered general fund money. And it is an area that council has decided to set aside. For example, things like property sales go into cumulative reserve. We had the golf course, we had the Belmont, and all of our properties. So they go in there, it's one-time monies usually, and we'll set them aside for certain things. Like I know the one we have in there, the smaller one, the 200,000 for left one medical expenses that come up. And then the other one, the big portion in there is from the sale of the golf course in 2017. And my understanding, I wasn't like in the director position at that time, but my understanding is from that part, council back in 2017 had wanted that money set aside for park type items. And I think the plan is to hold those funds until we get the park plan update, and then possibly use those here in the future. in the near future, probably 23 or so, possibly later in 2022, as the park plan gets updated. So
Okay.
that's kind of some of the history.
So is there any amount that is not specifically bookmarked for something that is going to remain within the cumulative reserve?
No.
Okay. So that is what Richard, Councilmember Bloom meant with the zero, that there is
And
nothing that is not.
so that would be, you know, proceeds from future sales of properties and such that go in there again as we sell more of the property around.
Okay. And the reason I'm saying this is because I'm concerned that if something were to fall through, knock on wood, with this, the money that we're expecting to get in to replace the money in the budget that we're removing from community development and from the police department equipment and machinery funds, how are we going to recover that money so that we can hire a consultant, so that we can have that other vehicle? Because as we're growing, we're going to need that consultant. We are going to need that extra police vehicle for the amount of people that we have in the city. And this isn't a question really for you, Aaron. It's just in general a concern that I have, because what do we do if we don't have it? Is there any way that we can say, if we don't have this money by the time that we need it, we can use money that has been earmarked for later down the road in the cumulative fund and use that? And then the money that we would get in that we're expecting for these, at that time we do get that money, we can put that back within the cumulative fund, so that, or cumulative, that is a hard word to say, cumulative reserve.
Yeah,
to be earmarked.
it is. And that's a good question, Kate. And it's highly unlikely that we're going to see that particular scenario play out, but it could possibly happen. So I appreciate the question. And at that time, we would certainly call a workshop with council and have that discussion. But there's also other properties that we own that have interest. I mean, I could ask Roscoe or Eric, he might even know how many more properties that we have that are available besides the police station that's out there. And then talking with Erin, she's seeing that the true up is most likely going to be a higher number than what is anticipated. So the true up may be even looking better as far as that goes for the end of 2020. So, you know, that's a good question. And the answer would be, we would assemble council and have that discussion if by chance it happens to occur, but it is a very highly unlikely scenario.
Okay, I'm not a gambler. I don't go by highly likely. I need extremely strong guarantees.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to this amount of money coming from departments that desperately, we've heard, need the money.
Yeah, and I certainly understand that. And as we've had discussions with council in regards to this particular issue, what happens when that date comes in 23 and the port has not drawn the RCCF funds and our note becomes due? We're going to be paying $1.3 million again, or anyway, with being in a worse condition, not being able to figure out an RCCF project and a knee-jerk reaction to put something together. And then, as we've discussed, as long as it takes to work through an RCCF project, it can take up to a year to be approved. Then you've got to build it and draw your funds. So, you know, if you're not a gambler, I understand that, but do you want to gamble at the end of the game, or do you want to take positive, conservative approach and address something that we know could be a potential negative impact to the city? And we've had these discussions, and I believe everybody was in an understanding and agreement that this was going to be the best avenue in which we took. So with that, if you have anything else.
I do. And mostly it's just that I would think that a conservative outlook would be to look for something further than 2022 And for instance, some of the items that are earmarked in the cumulative reserves, I said it right?
Good.
That's further than 2022, if that's possible. I just concerned that we're bumping up to limits in time. And also, as Councilmember Bloom had mentioned, since this specifically hadn't gone to the Finance Committee with myself and Councilmember Bloom and Councilmember Brown, I just really want to make sure that we're taking a beat to verify that this is the place that we want to take the money from at this moment, with the possibility of continuing to waterfall down the road rather than looking at much later items that the cumulative reserve would be earmarked for. That's my main concern with all of this, is I don't want to continue to waterfall this down.
Okay, very good. Thank you. And we'll move to Councilmember, I believe, Councilmember Smart. Let's go ahead and have your comments.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let me lower my hand here. Yeah, so let's see. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, actually very much for that explanation of the RCCF timeline and how long it would take us to get a project up and rolling. You know, and that's really was my understanding as to the main purpose for pursuing the payoff of this property at this time, was so that we're not relying on the on somebody else to come up with a plan to spend that money. So the follow-on question to that is you know, what maybe Roscoe or yourself could just review very briefly what that process will look like moving forward. Like what will we be doing to pursue a project to get those monies spent? Am I understanding that correctly?
Go ahead, Roscoe. Yeah.
But let me say two more things briefly, because I want to ask Aaron, what is the legally required amount that the city has to maintain in reserve, if any, by the state?
We do not have to, in the general fund as a total, it's 20% of the revenue, which at the end of 2020, we're to carry a reserve of 1.7 million. So that is general fund requirement per our fiscal policies. Cumulative reserves, so basically any of your funds that start with zero. So we have like the 002, the 004, so which is I'm drawing a blank. But we have these managerial funds that kind of fall under, so we can roll those up. But the general fund has to carry a balance of 1.7 million at the end of 2022. So the beginning balance of 21 needs to be at 1.7.
And so the cumulative reserve that we've been talking about, the 1.3 that we'll have left over after we spend this, if this happens.
That is a managerial fund that council, previous councils have established to carry funds, and they'll set aside specific things. So, and that's, like I said, the 1.2 million sitting in there from the golf course is previous council wanted that.
I heard that, but my question is are those funds part of the reserve that we're required to maintain under state law?
That's a separate reserve. Yeah.
I wanted to make sure that was clear. Okay. And I believe the reason for the money of the golf course going to parks had something to do with the fact that it was some sort of a parkland fund or something.
Yeah, the golf course was recreation, and so we wanted to make sure we kept it in the recreation field. So that's
I thought we were maybe even legally required to do that. Like we couldn't spend it on other things. No, Roscoe Shane said, okay.
No,
that was a decision. That was a decision that we made at staff to make sure that it didn't get away from our parks as it's needed, as Gail has pointed out.
Yes, thank you. So and I just want to make another quick comment that I presume that the borrowing of these funds from other departments, you know, is partially, although it's intended to be paid back, I hope that each department is exercising contingency dollars in their planning, because everything doesn't always go perfectly. So maybe to answer Kate's question, there might be some of that too. In other words, if I were managing a multi-million-dollar budget, I wouldn't necessarily ask for the actual amount of money that I plan. I'm going to ask for the amount of money I need, and then I'm going to put a contingency on that. Which brings me to just another comment that I hope that our organization as a whole maybe considers combining those contingency plans as a whole group, which might allow us to trim our budget even a little better. Because you know, bad things don't happen in all the departments all the time, but on occasion bad things happen and cost us money. So that's just a comment. I don't need a response to that, but I would like to get back to the RCCF project overview plan from here forward. Roscoe, maybe you could address.
Yeah, good question, John. So assuming that council passes the budget and elects to pay off the $1.3 million note to the port, we would probably go through the utility committee to brainstorm on some ideas on potential economic development projects. I could see a future council workshop probably on that to vet those in and decide which projects we're going to go forward with. I think the fund, the last time I saw an update, there was a little over $1 million in it currently in the bank that could be appropriated to a project. And I think it was growing by about 35,000 even through the pandemic. It's down a little bit, but our share is growing about 35,000 a month. And the last estimate I saw before Jessica left, that she anticipated, you know, it's going to grow through June of 2023. And I thought it was real close to 2 million is the total that would be in that fund. So we would have a discussion to how to appropriate those for an economic development project, meeting Benton County's requirements. I slated, it's probably a 6-month process to go through and vet that to make sure that we're the timing of projects and really what's going to give us the biggest bang for the buck for that. And then once those are vetted, then we'd start the application process to start applying to the county for that.
And is the final deadline, is the final deadline when you begin the project to start spending the funds, or when the funds have to be completely spent?
Let me pull that up. I'm glad I pulled this thing out just to make sure.
Okay.
So the fund continues to grow until June of 2023. And you've got till June 30th of 2026 to have expended it and seek reimbursement.
Okay.
It seems like a lot of time, but from when council says go through the planning process, through the application review and approval through Benton County, to doing the design, the right-of-way, permitting, constructing it, and close out, it's almost a 4-year process.
Right.
I'm sorry to say it's not streamlined. It should be, but it's not. So
so that just wraps up my comments, and it's what the information I wanted to make sure was presented as to why I will support paying this property off with these monies now, because it is the conservative approach. I think I agree with the mayor and the others on the staff that if we don't do this, we are risking maybe missing the opportunity to successfully spend the RCCF funds in time. So this does seem like a conservative approach to me, and that's why I'll support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Smart. Mayor Pro Tem Brink, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the questions and discussions so far that I've heard from Council Members Smart, Brown, Bloom, and Moran. I too was a little bit concerned when I first saw this and the discussion as to how the community development professional services might be reduced. But I appreciate the explanation that it's not a delay per se, as it was not anticipated to expend these funds until 2022. So that gave me a little bit more reassurance there. Of course, I'm always concerned too if the police department may face a situation where they cannot properly respond to safety incidents or events that occur in our city. But I've also had my concerns assuaged a great deal just with the discussion on that topic. So I appreciate this. I think that my thoughts would be similar to what Councilmember Moran mentioned. Number one, that we all agreed as council that taking the lead on addressing the RCCF matter would be to our benefit. But I think that when we came down to the actual budget machinations and where the money was coming from and how things were going to be moved around, that having the finance committee look at something like this, finance subcommittee rather, look at something like this would be appropriate in the future. Just so we get a first take, particularly since we have some experienced council members on that subcommittee who can also look at the history. Bringing the cumulative reserve down is a concern too, but I've also had those concerns allayed quite a bit because of the upcoming sales of other properties. So while I had some concerns at the beginning, I appreciate everyone's discussion. The bottom line is, Mr. Mayor, I do support this. I think it is important, as Councilmember Smart mentioned, to take control of the issue rather than let the issue take control of us somewhere down the line. So I think with us being proactive in addressing the RCCF matter, we're taking control of this concern and not going to be driven by potential inaction on the part of the port. So I support this. That's all I have, sir.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Brink. Councilmember Bloom.
Yeah, I wanted to come back and reiterate, I didn't want to mislead anybody that was watching, listening in or listening to the tapes afterwards, that this is not the city's reserve. I think I was clarified, but also as I look at it, our proposed budget for the ending balance of the city's total reserve is 2.3 million, which I assume that's anticipating that our budget come for the next 2-year cycle to be a lot higher than our current year budget, which was total expenditures of 20 million. I'm not quite sure where the 20% comes in. But we're spending about 18 million dollars. Is that about what I'm reading out of the general fund?
That sounds close.
I'm looking at the spreadsheet, all the numbers that are over here. But it looks like the proposed budget expenditures is 17.789 thousands.
And that's for the biennium. So that is
so I mean
for the 2-year.
Right, but that would be, and our 20% reserve is just for half of the year, correct?
Yes.
So that would be 9. So call it 18. 1.8 would be our minimum reserve. We actually have 23 in there.
At the end of 2020, I know our reserve requirement was 1.7, or just over 1.7 was the main.
And so actually, the way we look at the budget, we have more in the general fund reserve than we actually need. Without, I mean, the reason I stress our cumulative reserve balance is something that you know, we said we were keeping the 1.2 from the golf course sale, but it actually should be a little bit higher than that from the standpoint it did get some interest. Should be growing a little bit with
Yeah, and we've spent, in 2020, we spent some of those funds as well with the park plan update. I know we had the contract with AHBL, so some of that has been used slightly, not huge amounts, but as they're going through the park plan.
Okay. All right, well, I just wanted to clarify that, no, we're not blowing the bank out completely with emptying the cumulative reserve with, it just, we have dedicated most of the funds in that to specific tasks. And what we're banking on is, so if, assuming the sale of the police station went through, that would not go into the cumulative reserve, it would go into the general fund directly.
Yeah, I would probably put it into cumulative reserve and then bring it back as a budget amendment to recognize it, and then transfer this specific dollar amount back into general fund, just so it was very transparent on the use of funds. So it's going in, but everybody's seeing that it's going back. So you have that in and the out.
In and out in the same manner.
Mhm.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you, sir.
That's all.
And before we move to Councilman Buell, Ms. Stanfield had her hand up prior to you. Then we'll go to you, Mr. Buell.
This one's for Aaron. Being that we're doing so much of this real estate stuff anymore, is there a way that we can start having that over there so we can track it? Because what I'm looking at, just kind of Roscoe's thing here, I know we allotted 50,000 for the geotech. We've had, we put in some wells, we were checking some wells. We allotted 4 guys to clean up the racetrack all summer. I think that was in excess of 70,000. Looks like we had a water rights person looking at the water rights. We had taken some budget amendment from the engineers to the, which I'm assuming some of Roscoe's time for this. So if there's any way that we can start kind of tracking this so we can kind of know what's coming in, but what's actually going out, because we're doing a lot of this through the general fund. So I don't think it's really clear exactly what we're getting and spending and doing. I just would like the council to remember we signed a contract, and according to Roscoe's thing, I think we're making a lot of presumptions, and I could be wrong. There's always 2 sides, but on this PowerPoint, you did state that in June, the port came back to ask you if you had any CF projects, and you decided not to do that. So if we do any more, I would really invite council to actually read through the whole contracts, because again, it just kind of baffles me that we can sign a contract and 2 months later be doing something different.
Thank you. Councilmember Buell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, council, a good conversation, a lot of good questions, a lot of good viewpoints tonight. I want to go back to one simple thing, and that is that I've sat on this council for a long time, but I've also been on the Visit Tri-Cities Board of Directors for an awful long time as well. And one of the members on that board there's always a spot for the Port of Kennewick. And now I like every one of the commissioners in the port. They're all good people. And I remember sitting in a board meeting, and it's got to have been 5 or 7 years ago now. And it was a great presentation that individual gave about the great and wonderful things that they're going to do at Vista Field and some of these other locations that the port manages. And I knew at that time that they have a vision, and I can't fault them for that. But I also know that the Port of Kennewick and West Richland are supposed to be partners in this. And I raised my hand at that meeting. Again, we're talking 5 or 7 years ago. Commissioner said, I know it's not West.
You're breaking up, Rich.
Plate, stepping up to do much anything out here. They're member is, their work plan doesn't even call for anything in West Richland again. So, let's be able to do things on our own now, okay? If we've got the money and we can afford it, and now we can do things on our own, we don't have to ask for these people to help us, which they're not doing in the first place. I say, let's go for it. So I apologize for the long-winded dissertation. Again, I didn't mean my colleagues on the court. It's just that their actions have spoken louder than their words, in my opinion, and that they have not stepped up to the West Richland plate. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Buell. Gail?
I want to make, we're partners with the port. I understand that it's been kind of contentious that we're not getting our taxpayers' money out of it. But this is my opinion about that. The last year or two, they have kind of stepped out. We know they were going to micromanage that project, and we knew that we weren't going to see development out here. However, they did come through. They did the fire station. They almost gave them that land for that new fire station. There's $1 million off of this, and we didn't have the money at the time, so they are holding the note. Again, please read our contracts when we go further.
Okay, council, thank you for the good discussion. And I see no more hands up, so we will go ahead and move on. And I will ask council, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign.
Nay.
Motion carried. Thank you, council. We have Mr. Buell. I know you have another commitment with Washington, D.C. coming into town tomorrow, and you're going to make sure that you give them the best wishes of the Tri-Cities and give them a great tour. So I will cut you loose now so you can finish up with your responsibilities with DOE. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, council. Appreciate that.
We have no unfinished business this evening. And for new business this evening, we have a periodic shoreline management plan update from Community Development Director Eric Mendenhall, and he will provide a staff report for the first discussion of this periodic shoreline management plan update. Eric?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, members of the council. This evening, I'll be presenting on the Shoreline Management Plan, or SMP, periodic update. This update already received public comment and has held a public hearing before the Planning Commission on November 12th, 2020. In my presentation this evening, I'm going to be overviewing what the Shoreline Management Act and the Shoreline Master Program are. I'll be outlining the SMP periodic review process, review the current draft at a high level, and continue with our public participation process and public comments. So myself, Eric Mendenhall, have been leading this along with Nicole Stickney, our contract planner with AHBL, and been working with Chelsea Benner and Leonard Jordan at Department of Ecology for their review of our update. So why are we here? Why am I going through all this wonderful work and process? State law requires that cities that have a shoreline master program be reviewed and revised if needed on an 8-year schedule. We're on that 8-year timeline. We need to have it updated before the end of this year. So we're well ahead of schedule by getting it done here at the first of the year. Ecology has prepared a checklist for us all to review to make sure that all of the new laws and rules are being complied with and adopted in our SMP. So we're looking at where the gaps are. We're going through a gap analysis to see what needs to be updated and provide amendments as needed. The Shoreline Management Act was passed in 1971 and affirmed by the voters the following year. State legislature issued an update to that act that created new rules in 2003. And this act governs the rules and uses of development within state shorelines. There are three particular focuses or policies associated with the Shoreline Management Act, which is protect environmental resources of state shorelines, preserve and enhance public access and enjoyment opportunities, and give priority to uses that require a shoreline designation. And I should also say that in the 2003 update, that mandate required significant updates to a very old document. Most cities had a set SMP or a shoreline management program that was adopted in the 70s and hadn't been updated at all until after 2003. Where this update was pretty minor comparative. So the Shoreline Management or Master Program implements the Shoreline Management Act, serves as city and state plan for managing shoreline areas, and establishes goals, policies, regulations, protections, and uses for development within the shoreline. It also establishes a plan for restoring the shoreline in those areas where it's been degraded. What isn't changing in this update, the changes are fairly narrow in scope. Ecology sent out their guidance, and we've reviewed that guidance and we've adopted and changed consistent with ecology. Ecology is not funding any additional scientific analysis of the shorelines. And most development, setbacks, height, width, lot coverage, etc., will remain the same. We actually are increasing height in our high intensity area. The changes will not prohibit any residential development on any established lot. So here's the framework of the SMP. You've got your goals and policies, the uses that are allowed in the different jurisdictional areas. Shoreline modifications, it talks about that. Those are dredging, filling, and shoreline stabilization efforts. You've got development standards that have to be reviewed and checked on for new development. You've got restoration, vegetation removal, enhancement, and public access. So what are the roles of the local and state agencies? So the City of West Richland, we adopt the Shoreline Management Program or Master Program, which we take the lead on permitting. We review and oversee the permits for it. We do enforcement as necessary, and we keep our program up to date as the state updates their guidance. Ecology, they provide the guidance. They also provide financial support. So we hired a consultant to help us with this, and they paid for that consultant to help us with it. So it's not an unfunded mandate. They also provide technical assistance when necessary. If there's questions that we have associated with the shoreline, we're able to give them a call and they'll come out and help. They also approve the local Shoreline Master Program before it can take effect. So where does the Shoreline Management Act apply? This regulates areas that are lakes greater than 20 acres. We don't have any of those. It also regulates streams with a mean annual flow of 20 CFS or greater. We don't have any of those. And it regulates rivers with a mean annual flow of 1,000 CFS or greater. We do have one of those. It's called the Yakima River. It also applies to lands that extend 200 feet landward of the ordinary high water mark, associated wetlands, floodways, and floodplains. And I'm going to stop here for just a moment. And you all can see this screen, I presume?
Yes.
Okay. So this shows the areas mostly that are regulated by the Shoreline Master Program. You've got areas here along Van Giesen, up Butteport, and along the river here and the golf course. There's these little slivers along Harrington Road and on Fern Loop here that are regulated, but are very, very small in nature, and in most areas are up against a canal or So there's not a whole lot of, or existing developments, we're not anticipating seeing significant changes there. Here's a wider scale view of these areas. So the right-hand side is the areas that I showed you in that last slide. Reach 1, that's up far north along the ranch property up against Benton City over here in the county. So as you can tell from these maps, most of the areas have already developed out. I'm not anticipating a lot of development permits coming in for shoreline work. At least that's my hope. So the SMP, the Shoreline Master Program, is broken out into chapters. You've got the introduction, you've got your master program elements that goes through your goals and objectives. You've got the environmental designations, your high intensity designation, your urban conservancy and rural, or not rural, but other designations that we have. You also have general regulations. These are the development regulations that apply to specific developments and specific development actions, such as grading, clearing, floats, docks, things of that nature. You also have use-specific regulations. You've got detail on how this SMP will be administered. So that gives you your permit processes. You have definitions, terms used in the SMP, and you have the appendices with all of the maps and critical areas and whatnot. So the main changes to this document, what are we changing? I reviewed this again today, and it clarifies shoreline jurisdiction, so where our shoreline jurisdiction exists. It addresses associated wetlands. Those are wetlands that are in the floodplain effectively of the river. It allows for tribal fishing and foraging activities. It specifically calls that out. That was a request of the Confederated Tribe. It increases height in the high intensity designation to be consistent with the zoning code. It updates public noticing requirements and permit process. It expands and clarifies exempt activities. It updates definitions to be consistent with the state definitions, and it updates code references. So it's fairly minor in its effect and changes. And again, there's no additional setbacks or increases to buffering that you may have seen in your prior update in 2004, 2005. So the timeline to date, we started it out at the beginning of the year, hiring our consultant, and then we had COVID hit, so we slowed things down a little bit. But they reviewed our documents. We held a public virtual open house in June. We had about 18 participants show up to that. In October was the conclusion of the public comment period and the city's response to public comments. And then in November, we completed the final SMP and the text and whatnot, and held a public hearing with the Planning Commission on the 12th of November, which in that meeting, the subsequent meeting in December, they recommended council approve the proposed SMP. And on November 13th, we submitted our application to Ecology for their initial review and determination, which we're waiting to hear back from them. And our projected future timeline is I'll be bringing this back at our next council meeting for anticipating adoption. And then be forwarding that on to Ecology for final determination, which we're expecting by the end of February. Again, here are the contact information for City of West Richland and the website that we've posted to advertise and provide information to the general public. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Very good. Nice presentation, Eric. Thank you. And we'll go ahead and get back to full screen there. Does anyone have any questions? I see a couple hands up already there. Perfect. Councilmember Bloom.
Yeah, I was reading through some of the comments, you know, the ones relative to, from the National Audubon Society. As part of the Yakima Fish and Wildlife Recovery Board, the focus of salmon recovery for the Yakima Basin is shifting down to the lower basin. A lot of the work in the upper basin has been completed as far as fish passage and things of that nature. Other than some relatively major projects, this past session, the first lower Yakima Basin project was approved. That was sponsored by the Benton Conservation District, trying to get some cooler water into the stream. And so my concern overall is that there's nothing, the area around the golf course, which is the area that's most, how do I put this, native, sort of native, maybe. I'll say it's native, but it's really got a lot of invasive species going into it. The impression is that it's good for the wildlife and good for the river. That may not be the case. And so I've been trying to get some sponsorship to really look at that reach of the Yakima to improve it from both, not only we looked at before, I think Eric's predecessor got a really good lesson in tick management, walking that trail along the river. Am I correct, Roscoe? You're laughing. He picked up, that was his only comment when he walked it. You know, the part of the shoreline management plan is to manage the shoreline and actually give public access, and not preserve a weed patch, so to speak. And I'll look really closely at what we've changed, and make sure that parties that might be interested in looking at solving some of the problems, because right now we are going to start harvesting the weeds out of the river, and try and get some of this stargrass out of the river so that it'll flow a little smoother, less mosquitoes, all sorts of good parts of that. You know, people have taken a lot of the water upstream, so there's not a whole lot of water running down the stream. And so we have to make sure that that water that runs down the stream is beneficial to transporting fish both up and down the river. Otherwise, we'll never restore the fish runs. So I'll get off my high horse.
Thank you for your comments, Richard. Mayor Pro Tem Brink.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First off, I want to thank Mr. Mendenhall for putting together what I view as a very comprehensive and very focused to our particular city, our particular needs and our concerns. I did notice, however, that although we had a public comment period, public hearing, no comments from the public were received. And I'm just wondering, did we get any written comments at all, Mr. Mendenhall? And could you characterize those a little bit, or I'm just trying to figure out what the public input was.
Yeah, we did have quite a bit of public involvement and public input. Most of them wrote their comments into us and had those public submitted in written form. We received comments effectively since the virtual open house that we held all the way up to the public hearing. And, you know, the Audubon Society, as you saw, they had quite a few comments in there. And I appreciate their comments and the time they spent on those. And so we do have quite a few comments. All of those comments that we've received are included in your packet. You probably saw with the city's responses to each of those comments that were provided.
Yeah, I guess my main concern just didn't seem to be, you know, there were some comments from our citizens, but perhaps COVID is driving, you know, the lower response. My history on Planning Commission was we'd get a lot of involvement from our citizens on this. Was that the case in this situation as well?
Well, I felt like we got quite a bit of involvement from the amount of feedback that we received. But I also, you have to consider the difference between the prior SMP update that was adding significant setbacks and buffers to these shoreline jurisdictions to the one that was a periodic review. And like I said, I went through that list of, what was it, 8 items of subjects that were changed in here. None of those increased buffer widths. None of those changed the impact as far as developability of a piece of property significantly anyways. I mean, it was, I didn't really see anything in there that would change it. So if you look at our shoreline area, it's really what's there at the Gateway project as you go north along Butte Court and the trail there. And we do provide some great public access there. Hopefully we'll be able to get some better access in the future even. And then the rest of it's the golf course, which is floodway.
Yep.
And so there's definitely some opportunities of I think maybe looking at doing some restoration activities and whatnot along the river there. But that's going to be, we don't own any of that land. And we'll be looking at that. But as far as public participation goes, the Markhams were definitely involved. They had a lot of, they should.
Yep, I would, yeah, and I saw their comments. That was,
yeah.
Of course,
So,
I would expect that. Okay, no, I appreciate giving a little bit more information to me, Mr. Mendenhall. Could you also send me, and I assume the other comments would be interested, just a copy of your PowerPoint presentation that you used tonight?
Yeah.
I didn't see that in the packet, but I thought that was a very good summary.
yes, I can get that to you.
That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Brink. Councilmember Brown?
I just wanted to tag on to Mr. Bloom. I know I talked to the mayor, I think it was last year or the year before. That river, when it comes to this bend, the river has moved over. So it's kind of left this big swamp, which has undermined a lot of the tree roots. And so we got a lot of dead trees and stuff. I know the mayor was able to get some of that trimmed back. But it's just all these dead trees and they're falling over. And some of them might eventually fall in the road. I don't know, but he's right. It's ticks. Is that where we're getting those West Nile positives is down in there, Mr. Bloom? Just you can shake. No. Anyway, there is a lot of just, there's beavers down in there. I don't know as far as the fish go, but that is kind of on that corner there, kind of a mess. I don't know what you do about it. And being it's moved over, I don't even know if it's a golf course. I don't know how they measure that out because it's gone out.
Richard, did you have a comment on the West Nile?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in. No, actually, the mosquitoes that this causes a problem with are the nasty ones that hurt.
No, I don't like them either.
They're more aggressive. The West Niles are not near as aggressive. They're just more dangerous. The West Nile is still up at our other wetlands up by Roscoe's house and Paul Keith, but a lot of them's been further on down Keene in the Richland area. That's where we've gotten the hits from West Nile. So
Thank you.
Not in the traps that are down by the golf course. I don't think it's quite the right. I don't know. There's something like 40 different species of mosquitoes around here, and it's not the right environment.
Okay. Councilmember Moran.
Thank you. Yes, I would also like to have a copy of the PowerPoint if I could, please, Eric. I just had a quick question. I was wondering, just scrolling through reading the comments, I agree with a lot of them, a lot of the responses the city has, but I was just curious on, what is this? Page, it says at the top, page 21 of the comments, it just has as the response, no response has been prepared, and I think that was the only one that did. I was just curious, would that have been just a comment noted, or do you know? Okay,
Yeah, we just have a comment for that. Yeah.
Okay, I was just curious if maybe you were producing a comment and wanted to get more information before doing that or not. And other than that, yeah, it's a lot to read, and I've been trying to figure it all out, so it's
I'm happy to answer any questions too if you have them come up over the next couple of weeks before
Sure.
the meeting next time, to answer any questions you may have.
Sure. I was just curious, more as a joke than anything. The issues we're having locally with water, is it considered wetland only if it's wetland because of a river, or does surface water count?
That's a long discussion asking a wetland biologist that question. I'll reserve that answer for another time.
I think there's a cup of coffee on that answer right there. Yes, sir.
I'm sure.
Like asking an engineer, are lines straight? Councilman Smart.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Eric, I was just curious. I did notice that the Skylar Markham had a lot of comments. I was really impressed with the thoroughness with which he'd gone through this thing, and I was a little perplexed in times. I guess I don't know exactly. I mean, I understand there's ownership of the golf course and nearby lands, but it seemed like a lot of the comments were tending toward looking for more regulation or more thorough examination of situations. I mean, am I correct in characterizing his comments along those lines?
His comments, I think, were more related to ensuring that the multifamily property that they have next to the golf course there, that they would be able to be developed without additional regulation from the S&P. So
which makes sense. So I guess the one part that I sort of focused in on was, in a number of places there's talk about clearing foliage, pruning trees, restrictions on no more than 20% of limbs, and you can't top trees. And there's ideas about clearing invasive species and then replacing them with native species. And then all of these things, which I can't count how many there are. They're all over the place in this document. I mean, it seems to me anyway. I didn't highlight them all with yellow marker as if I'd had a hard copy, but anyway, my question is, most of them have comments like that these actions would need to be monitored and approved, et cetera, et cetera. my question is who monitors, approves, and approves the plan to do things like go clear some shrubbery along the shore, or prune a tree branch off, or if there's a snag in the river, do we as a city have some sort of a program? Does the county have a program to do things like that? Do private citizens, will they get in trouble if they go and clear a tree snag out of the Yakima River where their kids like to kayak? What's the regulatory liability? What do we do here as a city?
I wouldn't recommend anyone go and prune trees in the river.
Dangerous.
Probably not a very safe activity to do in the first place.
Right.
And as far as pruning on the property, again, John, this is a lot of money that the state spent for the city of West Richland to have this program for a very small number of people in West Richland.
Right.
You look at the properties along the river. We own all of the property there next to the bridge over the Yakima River until we get to the golf course, and then the golf course owns all of that property around it. And so as you're looking at pruning trees and things of that nature, we don't have staff that goes out there and, hey, who's doing what, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if we get a phone call, then that'll activate us to go down and do something, right?
Okay.
And check on it. So our city staff will be probably pruning some trees along the river there to make sure that there's still visibility to the river and whatnot, that the trees are growing up the way they should be.
Mm-hmm.
Probably going in and doing some weed maintenance at some point. I'm sure Roscoe has, hundreds of thousands of dollars stashed away to do that somewhere. But you look at those things and there's some prudency to it. Yes, there is a lot of regulation that comes with the shoreline. Coming from the jurisdiction that had two major rivers flowing through it and development that was happening all along its corridors, I processed a lot of shoreline permits when I was there. Here, I'm not anticipating processing more than one shoreline permit in my duration here, and I hope to be here a very, very long time. So this is, like I said, a lot of money that the state's put into this plan. It's there to protect the river and to provide guidance for development that does occur along the river. Most of our land that we have in our shoreline jurisdiction is owned by the Markhams, and it's in a floodway. Not a floodplain, a floodway. So you can't build in a floodway.
Okay.
So, and the areas that are outside of that are already developed and built out.
So the development that the Markhams that we believe intend to put up there on that area next to the golf course, that's what zone is that, in a shoreline management zone at all?
Nope.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Councilman Bloom?
I was just going to jump in a little bit and suggest Eric go have a discussion with Angela about the recent experience the Benton Mosquito Control had relative to just across the river over in Richland, where they got crosswind with ecology, and we had to get a standing, well, they were clearing out the ditches so that they could so they could actually take care of the mosquitoes, and someone started complaining. Now this is in coordination with the city of Richland, so there's a good lesson learned to go down. So I would suggest you take a walk down the street to mosquito control and have a discussion about maintenance issues. We have
plenty of war stories.
Yeah, and the thing mosquito control also deals with is beavers. Do we have to get a permit to break beaver dams? And the answer was no. So I mean, it gets very interesting. to say the least, but it's a little bit, your experience on the west side may be a little different on the east side. So you might want to get a flavor from Angela what her experience was.
Councilmember Moran?
I did, I figured out what else I was going to ask before that I had forgotten about. First, I'm wondering, any of the changes that we've made, that would not make anything that's currently happening right now or that has happened or that has been built would not be out of code anymore, right? Are you aware, Eric?
We're not changing anything that increases buffers or setbacks. So if there was any
Okay.
nonconformities previously, those will continue on. We're not changing that. We're not making, I don't believe that this document makes anything worse. for you.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm really having a hard time finding, and maybe I'm just not looking at the right thing, but is there something on here that goes through what specifically was changed that maybe I'm just not seeing out of the
I sent you
almost 300 pages?
Yeah, I sent you the clean document. I can send you the track changes document if you like as well.
Okay, yeah, I like looking at the track changes just to see what has changed. And then I'm just curious when you mentioned the cleaning up of branches, pruning, things like that. So would it be out of the realm of possibility for volunteer groups to come to the city and say, we would like to clean up this section of the river, can we do that? And would they be allowed to?
They'd be more than allowed to come and ask to do that.
Okay. I'm sure that there are a lot of youth groups, especially that are wanting to get out of the house, probably as soon as the weather starts to get nice after, I'm sure it'll probably get bad again. Yeah. And outdoors would be the perfect place to be, especially during the pandemic, as long as they're physically distanced from each other as necessary. So I know a couple groups that I might recommend this to in the near future. So excellent. Thank you.
Councilman Smart?
Yeah, Eric, on page 289, this summary of changes, it looks like it comes from the Department of Ecology. That's just changes that they made, not changes that we've made to this particular document, like Kate was just asking about. It's on the, so it's, yeah, page 289 of the packet, I guess. I'm sorry, I don't have any other way to reference it.
I'm trying to pull it up. It's not.
Yeah, that's okay. Take your time. Maybe it starts before that even. I guess not. Let me page up here. Oh, actually, it does start way up here. Okay. Yeah, it actually starts around page 281 of the packet. And it's got a heading that says Summary of Change. And it was prepared by AHBL. So I didn't know if that would.
We could ask Eric to go ahead and send out the track change document just to make it more clarification of it for everyone, so we don't have to try to figure out where it's at in this document.
Yeah, I had because I had the same question, and I thought I had answered my question when I was reading through this when I ran across this section of the report. But maybe I did not.
Yeah, we'll just ask Eric to go ahead and shoot everybody the track changes, and
okay,
we can have further conversation later in regards to that.
Yeah, that'd be fine. Thank you.
Yeah, perfect. All right, very good, Eric. Thank you very much. Appreciate your presentation. So I see his PowerPoint's already made his way to my PC, and the track changes will be followed shortly behind that. So with that, this is a time we open the meeting up to citizen public comment. And if you'd like to provide comments for anything not on the agenda this evening, please go ahead and raise your hand or *9 your phone, and we will be recognizing you for comments this evening. I lost you, Stephanie. Where are you at? Oh, there you are. You changed on the picture. Do you see anybody, Stephanie?
I do not.
Okay, very good. And with that, we'll move on. If there's any council that has comments this evening, go ahead and raise your hand and we'll recognize you. Councilman Bloom?
I'll just keep talking. Earlier in the consent agenda, we approved the expansion or the bond issue for lot 79, which happens to be down the street from me. Just to put a note, over the weekend, I started getting water into my crawl space from the rain runoff. We're still very wet down here. So the concerns of putting more asphalt down have me relatively concerned as far as developments there. So I'm going to suggest that possibly if we do any paving down there, your pumping's helping, but may not be actually getting everything. But we might want to consider not putting as much pavement and maybe backing off the 32-foot for that section of land, because the water's back. So it all seems to drain down here 40 feet under the development up on Paradise. So that's my only comment I have. And plus that will be going over the area where my neighbor put in a little bit of a diversion ditch underneath the street. So hopefully won't rip that up too much, but the water issue still goes on, and just keep that in mind.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Brown?
I was trying to figure out what I've done since we met. I did go to this Good Road State conference. Lieutenant Governor Congressman Hick was there. We had Judy Clyburn, I'm just going to butcher these names, a bunch of road advisory panel boards, political directors from the 242. There was a good group. There was a good discussion. There's 7.6 billion shortfall. They saw 64% decrease in transit because of the COVID, decrease in tax revenue, of course, from gas. So that projected shortfall will grow. The one thing, of course, they had a lot of different taxing that you could do. They were talking about trying to get the fish culverts out of the DOT budgets, completely get those out. And I don't know who they're going to dump them on, but they're sucking up a lot of funding for that. So I don't know if they'll find anybody to do that on. They also talked about the need for the extra wide striping that's coming up with the new transportation. I don't know if that's going to be needed in the residential. I would assume so with some of these electrical cars and so forth, but I didn't ask that question. I did get elected to the Benton County Executive Board on the Good Roads, and I think I just might have ended up on their AWC suggestion group. And I think that's all I had. I did attend the local Renters Association, and I'm very surprised. And this is some of the older apartments as well, because of the evictions and some of the legislature that keeps coming down the pike here. We have a lot of old landlords that are just selling out, and they're doing it pretty fast, which is going to make our rental properties higher because they're selling them for more and their mortgages are higher. So it'll cause increase in rent. So that's all I had.
Okay, thanks, Gail. Councilmember Moran?
Thank you. On Friday, December 18th, there was a Benton Franklin Council of Governments meeting that we had. We went over the comprehensive economic development strategies. We looked at what our initial unemployment claims were for all of the weeks throughout 2020. And we also found out that we have a new executive director for the Benton Franklin Council of Governments, and that is Michelle Holt. She is having a meet and greet in early January. Stephanie with BFCOG is the person to contact if you would like to attend this meet and greet, or I could get that information for anybody that would like to attend. On a separate note, this year is a year that we are going to have council elections, and it got me to thinking about the form of government that we have here in West Richland. I know that it was something that I talked about when I was running 2 years ago, and I'm curious if we will get a chance to discuss what our thoughts are regarding the form of government that we have, if we want to move to a different form, if we want to stay where we are but perhaps have a city administrator instead. This is not at all a reflection on how I think you're doing your job, Mayor. This is just in general my thoughts on how we are a growing community and how it seems that it is better to have a form of government like a city manager council for a city that's growing like we are. As a smaller city, it might not have been that important, but I think it might be something to look at starting this year, especially with the elections. And I was wondering if maybe we could discuss at an upcoming council event something that I was just talking to Roscoe about today, and that's regarding the parks. I don't know if Roscoe could go more into it at all, but it was something along the lines of, I can't remember what you had called it, Roscoe, for the parks. Do you recall?
The park plan update or?
No,
A Metropolitan Park District.
Yes.
For secured funding for our
Right.
parks, but it's got some downsides. We've talked about in the past with property tax and how that works, but.
Right. I'm curious when we have our next workshop or larger council get together retreat, if we could discuss some of those things like that. And also, I'm going to be sending an email as well to you, Mayor, and to Eric, but a pet project of mine that I would like to take on is seeing if there's a way to have a partnership with the city and the conservation district. There is a new thing that they have available that is for cost sharing. It could share the cost of up to 75% that the state conservation district would cover for landowners that are doing things to their property that is in a conservatory mind frame. For instance, if you are going from having grass and the standard landscaping that we see to xeriscaping, or xeriscaping, as I discovered I had been incorrectly pronouncing it. And there are other options I think that we might want to look at, especially with our parks and needing to limit some money that we are spending on it if we were to go, not completely, but in some of the areas that aren't fields that require grasses, to have more native plants that don't require the irrigation, which is one of the large costs we have. I would be interested in learning if there's any way that I could take on some of the burden that normally staff would in getting more information about this, especially with the long list of things that we've placed on Mr. Mendenhall's lap of things to do.
Yeah, send me that email, Kate. Eric and I had a discussion this afternoon in regards to your conversation. I appreciate your enthusiasm to reach out and try to assist in any manner you can. And I'll have Eric look into the conservation district and just exactly what it's involved with. It's not anything that we have right now with a partnership or a liaison position, but we'll certainly look into it and let you know what we find.
Excellent. I'm just looking at things like what the city of Kennewick has done, because they have created this garden that they've put aside, and I'm curious to see how much we would be able to partner with them. So I would love to look into that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Councilman Smart?
Yeah, I think I'll start. Thank you for commenting to Kate. Kate, I would just suggest that one of the options for a conservation area, and it would be the supposed potential Collins Road Park, which is, all of the BLM properties along that hillside, which, I will not claim it as a pet project because I don't want to call it that, but I do claim it as a real opportunity for the city to use hillside slope lands and keep them in a natural state with very little investment. I know Roscoe and I have talked about this a number of times, and we've supposedly got a letter in with the BLM up in the Spokane office as to whether or not we could acquire that property, and it's all convoluted. And I would like to see some attention placed on that. And I envision that as being a park that is nothing really more than probably a parking spot and a trail, which hopefully, in my mind, could connect Flat Top Park and loop all the way up, maybe to the top of Flat Top and head back down. There's a trail circuit there that would be really, it's already well used. This would just sort of make it official. So I would love to see that. And I know, Gail's talked about parks and you've talked about parks at this meeting, and I'll just put my 2 cents in that yeah, I would like to see that too. And I would not anticipate it being, hugely expensive. I'm not looking for a bombing range sports complex. I'm looking for just a preservation of sort of that natural environment. I will mention that there are even cactus that grow on that property that people don't know about. I'd like to preserve that. It's kind of unique around here. Also then, piggybacking on Richard's comments, should we be considering a change in building code for some of these new constructions that may be happening, like on lot 79 and others, where there's a potential for elevated groundwater? Should we allow easements? Should we disallow easements? Should we put houses on stilts? What should we be doing that's intelligent to prevent future catastrophes if we can't really solve this geological formation problem that we have? Just throw it out there as a comment. I'm not really looking for a discussion.
My concern was more runoff than anything else.
Okay. Yeah, and maybe you'll have to cook up a pot of coffee, because if you do have constant surface water, there may have to be a discussion about whether or not you're living amongst wetlands and whether the shoreline banking plan applies. Yikes. I know they had trouble with that in, where was it, Idaho or Montana? It's a big to-do over that. Farmers that have groundwater that started being considered shoreline. And then the last thing, I'll just make a comment just to reflect sentiment that I've heard from my constituents and others, is that, of course, everybody's tired of the COVID restrictions. I would like to state that I think that the recommendations by the health department and CDC are very much worth abiding by. I, however, do not believe that we are in a state of emergency. And so there's a difference between, having remote meetings and practicing social distancing and maybe wearing a mask when you need to, versus having a state of emergency. We don't need to have a state of emergency in order to do all of those other things to keep ourselves healthy. So I just wanted to say that it's my opinion, and I know there's sentiment on both sides, but I just don't see the reason for having a state of emergency anymore. I think that that's overkill, and I know that I'm maybe not a popular voice or maybe a common voice in saying that, but looking at the situation, I simply do not see an emergency. So I'll just leave that there, and I thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Kate again?
Yes, thank you. What Councilmember Smart said reminded me of what I had seen at the meeting yesterday at Pasco City Council. And I was wondering if we were looking into something similar to what they did with doing perhaps a hybrid or some version like that of being able to have some council members meet in person. I know that some people don't have the best internet, and so being in the council chambers, constituents, might be better for them because they aren't able to see us on Zoom. So I'm curious if we are looking into that. I'm also curious into doing something similar to what perhaps Kennewick does, where they have contracted out their communications to where they have a company that does all of the video editing and puts it together so that it can be broadcast on their website. It can also be broadcast on Facebook and can be maintained on their website. I know that we don't have the ability to do that on our own because we don't have the storage, but if we could look into, along with some of the other things I mentioned, at perhaps a workshop again, or at I'm not sure if we have a retreat this year, but I would be interested in making sure that when we do decide that we are going to be more in person, that we still allow for remote capabilities, and that we can use this momentum that we have in using virtual meetings to at least maintain part of that. And definitely looking at what Kennewick has done with contracting out, comparing it cost-wise to what Richland and what Pasco does, where they control their own and have a communications person on staff that specifically is in charge of that. Personally, I think the way that Kennewick does it might be more efficient for the way that our city is. But I would be willing to look into that further so that we can get into the present day, not even the future, but the present day when it comes to technology for our citizens.
And obviously, we have to work within our budget that we've just adopted. And
Yes.
after the governor makes his decision where he's going to be on the 14th of this month, will give me an opportunity to determine other directions we may potentially consider through the Open Public Meetings Acts and things of that nature. Besides I understand that Pasco's is going to take a retooling a little bit. I mean, they've got more technology and more manpower and all of the above to easily adapt to that. We just now got ourselves a tablet for you to work on. So
Yeah, which is greatly appreciated. I've been using mine, which thank you, Stephanie, for helping me figure that out. It's been really nice to have it on full screen so that I can read as I go through.
perfect. Yes.
Yes, but I would be really hoping that we can work off of what other cities and municipalities have done and use their knowledge that they've had and that they've put together so that we can come up with the best solution for us and for our constituents.
Understood. Staff, anybody have any comments this evening? I see Mr. Slade.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just going to give council an update on some legislative items that I did receive confirmation from a Ecology staff member that Ecology's request associated with their ASR program, which deals with our well 10, is on the governor's draft budget, capital budget currently. So that's another $1 million to continue forward with our well ASR if that stays there and doesn't head out. The other thing is the mayor and I have a meeting scheduled on the January 14th and hoping to have some more information on the state's transportation budget and where funding for their SR 224 Red Mountain transportation project is. in the governor's budget or isn't, or is it contingent on some new taxes or revenue? So we'll get some updates on that to see where that's at and see if my information from my sources matches the information Gail's getting. So I do appreciate you, Gail, sending those emails out. It is helpful. Sometimes our information matches, but sometimes, you know, I think people are guessing at this point where we're going to end up on the transportation. And then the other item we've got, after about 18 months hiatus, our NPDS permit for our wastewater treatment plant basically expired about 18 months ago. Prior to that, we were required to submit letter of intent for renewal, which we did in a timely manner, but College East just finally submitted our new NPDS permit for our draft review. So staff will be going through that to see any changes in that discharge permit compared to our existing permit. So stay tuned for that. But other than that, happy to have Julie West as our new engineer. I can't remember if I announced that at our last council meeting, but we were successful in hiring an engineering manager for capital improvement projects. Julie comes from the city of Richland. I'm now joined the chief in snagging employees from Richland. That's a first for me after 21 years. She comes highly qualified background. She's probably got over 20 years experience between City of Richland, private consultant with HDR, and also DOT. So she's hitting the ground running with our capital projects, and so excited to have her here and start moving forward with some of these capital projects we've got slated over the next 2 years. So that was it. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Roscoe. Any other staff members? Okay, I'll keep it short. I'm going to send everybody a email I got from Benton Franklin Health District. I got it on Friday, and it's a allocation guidance as far as tier 1, tier 2, how they're going to distribute vaccine. It kind of looks like now that the Benton Franklin Health District is actually being a recipient of the vaccine. So maybe they got a little heat from the city managers and county administrators for not being part of the puzzle. Then I also sent out to you earlier this evening Governor Inslee's announcement to the Healthy Washington Roadmap to Recovery. Has a couple of phases that he's got 2-phase system, and it's based on regions. Our region is Kittitas County, Yakima County, Benton, Franklin County, Walla Walla, and another one down south there. So, you know, happy to be with Yakima again, yay. So that'll be a challenge, but the information is all there. So read through it if you want to get up to date of what the new COVID guidelines are going to be. With that, thank you, council, for a successful first meeting. Very good conversation. I'm glad everybody made it through the holidays just fine, and hopefully your tests are all negative. And with that, I will thank everyone for being here this evening and adjourn this meeting at 8:03.